I say this to my son a lot, who's a teenager. I'm asking you to do this, and I'm holding you accountable for this, not because I don't love you, but because I do. And that is hard for a young person to wrap their brain around. It's hard for adults to wrap their brain around sometimes. Right. But setting of limits, setting of boundaries is actually a loving act.
Addiction is not a surprise to God. We've got to stop acting like it.
This is Recovery in Christ, where we equip the church and bring hope to the hurting.
All right, welcome back. Another episode of Recovery in Christ. Today, we're very excited. Church leader, pastor, Christian counselor. If you're watching, we have a very special guest today. We sometimes ask, hey, why don't you get a PhD on the episode? Well, today we did.
We got him.
Today we have Dr. Brian Wynn. Let me tell you a little bit about him, and then Carl, let's dive in. Dr. Wynn has 22 years experience. He's a recognized leader in clinical psychology and addiction science. He's been licensed as a psychologist for 22 years, and he specializes in substance use disorder. He's an adjunct professor at Vanderbilt University. He's a regular expert contributor to WebMD and Healthline, and he was a former committee co-chair for the American Psychological Association. He's also a friend. Dr. Wynn, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, excited. We have, at one point, he was the chief clinical officer for over close to 800 beds across the nation. So in charge of that many people doing that thing. Right now with S2L, he is our chief clinical strategist. He's come on board, joined the team. We have welcomed him with open arms at S2L Recovery. We're so excited for his experience, his heart for the Lord, his knowledge-based, and his love for people is evident. So, man, I'm excited to have him today.
Oh, my goodness. Like, such a wealth of knowledge you have. But more than that, it's the man that you are. You have this wealth of knowledge. You have this love for Jesus and love for people. Every time that I have a chance to speak with you, for more than 2 or 3 minutes, I walk away having learned something. Yeah. And not just learning something like factual, like something that I can take in my walk with Christ. And so I'm so excited to have you today, because some of the pastors, church leaders, and other recovery workers are going to benefit from what you'll be able to share today, because a lot of this stuff needs to be brought into the realm of ministry. We need to understand some of these dynamics that you'll share today. So I'm going to start off with this question.
Well, let's tell them what we're going to talk about. The topic is helping versus enabling, a biblical perspective.
Yep. And the interesting part about that is we have a blog about this, and it is the number one visited page on our website. People want to know.
Yeah, it seems like that's a big Google search. I don't want to enable, but I want to help. Where's the line? It seems like a pretty big topic.
Yeah, for sure. And so help us with this. From a psychological standpoint, from a mental health standpoint, how do we recognize when care turns into enabling? Now, this is especially important in the faith community, where self-sacrifice is something that is important to us. It's the way we walk with Jesus. How do we recognize the difference?
Well, to me, first of all, thank you so much for the warm regards. I'm thrilled to be here with you guys, Carl and Adam. I really appreciate the invitation, and this is such a great topic. The distinction between being of service, helping someone, versus enabling someone is really about kind of the outcome on the back end of that, about functionality, right? So if I'm a person struggling with an active substance use disorder and or a mental health disorder, is my quote-unquote helping behavior perpetuating the cycle of those issues with substance use and mental health disorders, right? So if there's perpetuation of the cycle, in other words, it kind of, to use a fancy word, exacerbates what's going on from a substance use disorder or mental health perspective, then it can be qualified as enabling. I'm not sure I've actually defined enabling out loud before, but I think it's probably important to do so here. And if I had to come up with a quick definition off the top of my head, I might say something along the lines of creating situations or circumstances in which there is perpetuation of dysfunctional behavior. So again, that's just kind of off the top of my head. Might not be right on accurate, but nonetheless, I think speaks to the spirit of what enabling causes as an outcome. It exacerbates the level of dysfunction in someone who's struggling.
Mm-hmm. You know, hearing you say that now, it makes sense. My mind tends to go to the fact that those who are in an enabling in relationship or environment, it must be difficult for them to even recognize that, the self-awareness of it, because as you said it makes perfect sense. I think it's harder to accept that if you are the one either enabling or being enabling. And we know that there are long-term effects of this. And so what would be some of the long-term effects on both the one doing the enabling and the one being enabled if there are no boundaries?
Right. Well, first and foremost, I think as a background to this, I believe that struggles with addiction begin with a spiritual malady, right? There are debates out there about, the disease concept. I know there's been a podcast that I've actually seen that you guys did in Recovery in Christ related to whether or not the disease concept kind of fits from a Christ-centered perspective. But first and foremost, at its foundation, issues with addiction are the result of a spiritual malady that then in turn lead to behaviors, choices that we make that oftentimes involve using mood-altering substances, right? And thank God it's also treatable. And that's what we do at S2L, right? Is provide hope and love and light in God and provide a solution to this disease that can be life-threatening.
The rub against that is the identity aspect of it, where it goes, what certain aspect, what people do when you're talking about the disease and the aspect of minimizing us to a brain, not a soul. And so there is a conflict and a rub when we're talking about spiritual things and a lot of the ways that the world views the disease and presents the disease. But if we break it down in certain things, we just need to define terms that we could stand on the same page.
Absolutely.
So we can move past that. I just wanted to caveat it.
And the reason for that sidebar was not, of course, to get into the debate about whether people view this as a disease or not, but
Right.
things can get worse due to enabling behavior. That's the danger. So helping behavior, getting someone into treatment. Enabling behavior, covering up for them, right? Some of the codependent type things we do. Carl, you and I talked about the fact that codependency is a whole separate show in and of itself.
Can't wait to have you back on that.
But, hallmark of codependency is poor or limited boundaries, right? With that, sometimes we don't exercise good boundaries around holding someone accountable. That is enabling behavior. So if we allow someone to continue to kind of perpetuate their own cycle, addiction will progress. And that's what we're talking about when we reference what could be the outcome of enabling behavior.
Well, again, there's so much there to unpack, but the first thing I would say is you even just helped me with that whole progressive, the steps that enabling takes and where its ultimate destination is. So for somebody who is in a situation where there's addiction, I think it's important they understand where this is headed, and I think the word accountability, especially in church circles these days, has become almost like a dirty word or like a taboo. But there's so much importance to this idea of biblical accountability.
Yep.
And I think what we've done in some respects is we've went from one side of the pendulum to the other with it. And now this whole idea of accountability and boundaries, it's almost seemed like it's almost made to seem like it's unloving. It's not caring when you do that. How can we help pastors, church leaders, again, recovery workers, and I would say even families understand that if it's done biblically, that this is the best thing you can do for somebody, that it's actually a healthy thing?
I believe that human beings learn, myself included, by repetition. I think by way of spreading messages like we are here through the Recovery in Christ podcast and in other circles that are so important, repeating the message that healthy boundaries are actually a loving act, right? It's I say this to my son a lot, who's a teenager. I'm asking you to do this and I'm holding you accountable for this, not because I don't love you, but because I do. And that is hard for a young person to wrap their brain around. It's hard for adults to wrap their brain around sometimes. Right. But setting of limits, setting of boundaries is actually a loving act, right? And that accountability factor, I actually use that as a mantra a lot of times. I think the secret to long-term success in recovery is connectivity with the right people, plus accountability And that's what equals long-term success in recovery, right? Human beings, I believe, were created to be relational. Relationships are all about boundaries, honestly, when it comes right down to it at the end of the day. So setting healthy boundaries is very much part of our human condition of being relatable with other people. It's an absolutely, I think from a biblical standpoint, scriptural standpoint, it's all about connectivity with the right people and accountability to a design for living that fits with us from a soul perspective, from a human perspective in terms of how we engage with each other.
Yeah, that's
Super
good.
helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great information. You know, another thing that I like to tell people often is you make it as easy as possible for someone to walk into a life of freedom, and you make it as hard as possible for someone to stay in a life of addiction. Man, it's interesting hearing it talked about on a enabling on this level, because it's also just on the ground level, pastor, church person. If you're engaged in this type of work and this type of ministry, you need to understand that someone walking in addiction for any length of time has become a master manipulator. If not, they probably haven't stayed in a life of addiction very long, because you have to, hide this, remember this lie, come over here, say this. And so with that, someone who is a master manipulator, they're going to know exactly what to say that's going to hurt the worst. And so when you're holding your ground, when you're setting these boundaries, when you're wanting to help and not enable, they're going to make you feel like you're doing something wrong. And I just want to encourage you, you have a sound mind, and God's called you to be the one that's walking in and helping this person. Stand your ground. Know that you're not what they say. Like, hear their words, but know that you understand the truth and you have a clear mind and you've been given direction on how to help. And though it's hard, doing the hard thing, as Dr. Wynn said, we encourage you to stand firm inside of that. Although you might be told that you are doing the worst thing in the world, you're not. And so manipulation is a big factor when it comes to enabling. And we could talk about not giving money. We could talk about if you're hungry, let me give you food and all those things. But you will be told that you're the worst person ever by the person that you're trying to save and help. Stand firm inside of that. So hey, that's it. We're going to have part two. We're going to finish this conversation about enabling, but we're going to do that in this next episode. So stay tuned. Dr. Wynn, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Awesome.
And remember, if you're struggling with addiction or someone that you love is struggling with addiction, you can reach out to us at s2lrecovery.org or call us at 888-380-2865. If you're a pastor, if you're a recovery worker, and you want resources and support, reach out to us. You could check us out at recoveryinChrist.com or send me an email, carl@recoveryinChrist.com.
That's it.
Ciao.
Ciao.